I appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's here as well. And before I dive in, which I want to do so we can address as many questions as possible, I wonder if I can just ask people who are able to or want to just put in the chat who you are and what you do, so I can have a sense. Are you a teacher at a certain grade level? Do you have a child of a certain age? Can we do that quickly?
Sure.
I don't know if the chat will go to the whole group, but we can, if everyone can just go ahead and message, let's say Eric, Dr. Oxford, and then he can give kind of a summary of where we're at. But
I've just tried to update the settings.
Oh, did you open
but,
it? Oh, you did? Thank you.
I tried to, and also
it worked.
Dr. Rossetti. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
He's also was a co-host as well, so I'm glad it's working.
There you go. It's all good.
All right. Nice. So I'm seeing those. I'm going to share my screen here as well and get started. So I'm just going to dive right in. I'm going to talk a lot about some of my research and others' research around friendships. Touch on the importance of friendship. I think everyone would agree that it's important, so that'll be very quick. Emphasize authentic friendship, what it is and looks like, as a really important foundation for any work in fostering inclusive peer relationships. And then talk a little bit about the approach that I have taken and emphasized, which is a focus more on the context for friendship opportunities, for social opportunities, than the individual student with a disability, which is a slightly different approach, I think, but an important one. And the bulk of this hopefully will be on the.
It's a very common expression of whiteness, right?
Social facilitation framework.
Culture that I just. What was cringy for it? Like, tell me how you managed that cringe, Beth.
Is there? Can someone mute? If
cringy and just like.
Excuse me. Could we please have anybody who is in the audience mute themselves? Thank you.
Thanks. The social facilitation framework is a broad framework that encompasses much of what I would have talked about up until that point, that ideally can be individualized for your children and students. And then we'll talk about some specific strategies, both general ones and grade level specific, time permitting, that would be part of that process of fostering inclusive peer relationships. All right, so importance of friendship. Friendship matters for all of us, and obviously including students with disabilities. And it is, without getting into some of the details here, people with friends are happier, healthier, and safer. I borrowed that from Jim Ross, who I collaborated with at the Arc of Mass. And it's really interesting because friendship operates on a couple of levels. Having friends results in personal benefit, emotional well-being, sense of belonging, etc. Protects against bullying experiences, including both bullying, victimization, and perpetration, which students with disabilities can be engaged in both. And it also provides, friendships also provide the structure or kind of the vehicle that drives social, emotional, and developmental gains when students are interacting with and learning with their friends. And part of why we're all here, I imagine, is because students with intellectual and developmental disabilities may not always experience the full range of benefits of friendship or relationships that would be defined as authentic friendship, and we'll talk about that. And in general, students with intellectual disabilities might tend to be socially isolated or remain on the social periphery of even inclusive classes and settings. Friendships, if they exist, or relationships that exist, might not extend beyond school. And students, even in inclusive settings, might tend to interact with or befriend others with disabilities, which is, I should say now, fine in terms of the diversity of friendships and the full range of relationships. We want to make sure that students are choosing relationships and do have a full range, including relationships with students without disabilities. Students with autism spectrum disorder, in all of the research I've seen, tend to have at least one friend, but overall fewer and possibly lower quality friendships than peers without disabilities, which just means shorter duration, maybe lower levels of companionship, maybe unilateral, like one-sided interactions compared to more reciprocal or mutual interactions, things like that. And some of my work looking at interactions in inclusive classrooms and that had pretty high quality inclusive education, I was really curious how students with and without disabilities were interacting. And in a couple of different studies at the early elementary level, second, first, and kindergarten inclusive classrooms. In one study, I conducted a series of open-ended observations, kind of classic qualitative observations. In another study, we conducted more structured observations, and interval recording, and keeping track of who was interacting with who, and where the adults were and what the students were doing and that kind of thing. And in both studies, and I'm writing one of them up now, in both studies, students with intellectual and developmental disabilities were engaged academically. The inclusive ed was solid, like I said, and actually engaged in comparable or in the more recent study, more classroom interactions. But they were more likely to interact with adults, teacher, paraprofessional, and they were less likely to engage with peers in non-academic social interactions. Interactions with peers or with adults tended to be academic in nature, about the lesson. So, lots of engagement academically, but those kind of social moments, which are often kind of quick in between and require some quick processing and recognition and things like that, students were less likely, with disabilities, were less likely to be involved in those. And so one of the things that I've taken from this is that inclusion alone is not enough. It's an important starting point, certainly, but inclusion alone is not enough. And so, the title of today's talk about promoting these relationships and opportunities is the type of work that we need to do. And even in, like I said, high quality inclusive ed situations, acceptance by classmates, lots of greetings and kind of working together, and no real big noticeable problems, still didn't inherently result in consistent friendship opportunities. And that's what I noticed growing up with my brother Todd. I'm the oldest of 6 in my family, and Todd is the fourth of us, the fourth Rossetti down, and he was a very outgoing person. He loved Boston sports. He loved the Red Sox and Bruins in particular. Huge sweet tooth, loved chocolate cake. He's a pretty skinny guy. I don't know where he put it all. He would devour sweets. And in school, he was included in New Hampshire, where we're from, pretty much from when we moved to Concord, first grade on. And our mother was in the first parent leadership series in New Hampshire that the Institute on Disability and at UNH put on. And so he was in school with his peers. Whenever we went anywhere, people would say hi to Todd. He was way more popular and well known than any of us older siblings or his younger siblings also. We all had moments of being jealous of that. And I was pleased. I was happy about that at first. You know, he was well known in the community at every grade level. He was probably one of the most popular students. And when I looked a little more closely at it and thought about it a little more, I noticed a couple of things. People would say hi to him and greet him. One of the few movements that he can control due to his cerebral palsy is if you hold your hand up, he will raise his right arm and shake your hand or give you a fist bump. And he's obviously very emotionally expressive, as you can see in these pictures, laughing, smiling, and lots of you know, non-spoken communication. Communicating and connecting with people without speaking was one of the many gifts that he taught me. And people would come up and shake his hand or give him a fist bump all the time. And then they would walk on, and I think they would walk on to what they considered to be their real friends. And I say that because he hardly was called at home. He didn't see any classmates outside of school, other than a couple of visits, like during a couple of years, all the way first grade through 22. Just a couple of instances. And I've talked to other people over the years who kind of share that their child has experienced similar dynamics, that they're similarly extremely high-fived. And I think what was going on is he was included and he was accepted, but he wasn't befriended. And there was something about how people thought of him, how they perceived his very visible disabilities, you know, how they saw teachers and other adults at school interacting with him, maybe talking to him as if he were younger, things like that, that took him out of the pool of potential friends, if you will. And so that dynamic really has motivated me in my career, and I think is important. And I'm sure, you know, some of you might have similar dynamics that you might be thinking of. And there could be other dynamics as well. You know, I think many children with Down syndrome are seen as, you know, younger than they are, and might be seen as kind of more like a mascot than kind of a peer, an actual person sometimes, things like that. So as we're you know, as you're listening to me and hopefully thinking of questions, you know, keep that in mind, that dynamic, because this is my dynamic, and you know, I'm sharing some of the research, but also the personal dynamic for how I think about these things. And it may or may not apply in the same way based on your dynamics of your students or your children. And then the other piece of this that it taught me at an early age, and I've pursued in my career, is how can we achieve authentic, meaningful relationships? because authentic friendships between students with and without quote unquote severe disabilities are possible. And include strong personal connections. And one of the important lessons from a review of the literature I did, looking at research on friendships, was a really important dynamic that drives the rest of this presentation and drives the different focus, the different approach towards friendships. And that was this: opportunities play a more critical role in friendship development than students' social skills, skills, behaviors, social interactions, etc. All of the friendships in the literature that I reviewed between students with and without disabilities and students who had appeared to have very significant needs didn't rely on the students with disabilities passing certain milestones in their social skill development, didn't rely on certain readiness skills. Many students still were learning social skills. Someone like my brother Todd struggles to, we never quite found a communication system for him and struggles to move his body. So despite learning many social skills, struggled to perform them. And he could have and should have had friends. And in the literature, students needed the opportunity, not necessarily skill development. Though it certainly may help, but not skill development. It was about the opportunities. The other piece of why context matters and why we're looking at context instead of just the student with disability, which almost feels like blaming them for things that are out of their control, is that friendships include more than one person, right? They include two or more people. So peers have a role in this. And in one of my papers that was based on my dissertation, looking at 3 groups of friends with and without disabilities, each of those friendship groups included reciprocal, mutual, meaningful friendships. It was remarkable how the students talked about each other, the things they did together consistently in and out of school. And the friends without disabilities talked about the many ways that the friends with disabilities contributed to the relationship and gave back to them. The friends without disabilities enacted what I called friendship work, which included things like, for students who struggle in their communication, maybe initiating interactions or initiating time spent together. One high school student called the students' family parents to arrange their time together because he didn't use the phone. And it sounds like, maybe that's not that respectful or a great thing to happen, but that's what they needed to have happen in order to hang out. Real-time prompts, walking down the hall and someone starts to flap his hands, kind of looking at the window, or something caught his eye, and as classmates are walking by, and the friend just gives a light touch on the shoulder to as they had talked about ahead of time, because he didn't want to hold up the hallway or be seen that way. So examples like that are things that in the relationship and that the students without disabilities learned, and so they played a role. It was different than one-way help or unilateral support, which is something to watch out for, because it was in the context of reciprocal relationship, identifying how each contributed to the relationship, and it was sensitive to what students with disabilities needed in order to interact and hang out. The other piece is teachers. Students perceived as liked by teachers are more likely to be liked by their peers. That holds true for students with and without disabilities. Students with disabilities who shared more positive interactions, specifically with teachers, were more likely to be viewed as popular by peers. So the ways that teachers interact with students are critical. Peers see everything. So there's a modeling piece. How do you talk to someone with a disability? Hopefully like anyone else. Are there unique elements in how we do that for this individual student? You can model that for your other students. But also just by showing interest and being inclusive and being respectful, peers are going to pick up on that and see the individual with a disability more positively. Related to authentic relationships and friendships, it's important to think about, to ground all of this in what that means for any student or any person, and also how any student makes a friend. And that's what we're going to do next. All relationships, all friendships are developed based on initially proximity and similarity. People that you see regularly and share some kind of interest with, and so whenever I'm thinking about how we can promote friendships, it has to start with identifying the people in the context, who's proximal, and the individual student's strengths and interests. You know, what someone likes to do, what someone's good at, are generally how many relationships are developed, including for students with disabilities. The big one for me, I've mentioned a couple of times, transcending context means that we have to think about ways that students with and without disabilities can spend time in multiple settings. Authentic friends, authentic friendships, most meaningful friendships are enacted across settings. So, you know, as adults, we have work friends who support each other and get along with. And if you start to talk a bit about families, and then you get together outside of work for a dinner, and then start doing other things, you're transcending the work context. That's how that works. These four elements are usually relevant for younger children. They're how all relationships start. Older, you know, adolescents, young adults, and adults add on some other characteristics. These pieces, I think, are critical for you know, thinking about promoting friendships for students with and without disabilities. The companionship piece is just doing things together, and we'll touch on that in a second. These other characteristics are the you know, are manifestations or elements of meaningful relationships. As I said, for adolescents, young adults, adults, there's an element of duration here. There's help and support over time. There's conflict management. You know, you can disagree, you can have ups and downs, but you're still friends. That piece. Relative to students with disabilities, and I'll save. I was going to invite some comments, but I'll wait until the end. That was the plan. Relative to people with disabilities, I think reciprocity and mutuality are two critical pieces. So reciprocity, I kind of mentioned about the friendship work. You don't have to contribute the same thing to the friendship, and often when friendships include people with and without disabilities, there are different contributions, but it has to be give and take and reciprocal, not one-sided. And then mutuality is the other one. And this might be a little controversial. Hopefully people can wait until the Q&A to address it. Mutuality, as you can see, means that friends choose to be with each other and nominate each other as friends. Basically, that they've each chosen, that the friendship is chosen and enjoyed by both individuals. And some of the things we do in schools, middle school and high school in particular, where there's less inclusion, to make up for the lack of inclusion sometimes, I think, and to promote interactions and relationships, might sometimes hinder our efforts towards authentic, meaningful friendship, as we've been talking about it. Things like, some of the clubs and groups, Best Buddies. We have one here, and I'm the faculty advisor. So I think there are many great things it does. Students without disabilities, I don't know if they're mutually choosing a friendship with someone as much as choosing to be in that group, right? And it's a place where they might get to know someone, but I don't know if that's, and then be friends with them, but I don't know if that's always allowed to happen. And some of the other things, there are lots of unified sports programs. Same thing, excellent opportunities to interact. But I think places to really try to pay attention to what's going on and not stop there. And these characteristics are helpful in terms of looking at what's really going on, hopefully. All right, I'm going to keep moving here to get the specific strategies. 2 more slides. This is how, for the foundational part, and then we'll get into specific strategies. This is how, what happens when all students make friends, the social processes in friendship development. Surface structure refers to social exchanges that characterize friendship at any given moment. The surface level activities, which are developmentally normative social behaviors, basically what kids do together, based on their age, culture, gender, etc. So think like my daughter Grace, 3rd grade. She likes to, when she can, she and one of our neighbors choreograph dances and video themselves and performing the dances to their parents. She's playing Roblox, a little too much screen time these days. It's a interactive video game that she can play with her friends. And then think, what do students do in 10th grade? That's the surface level activities. The deep structure, that's the authentic relationship and kind of the goal. That's the essence of the relationship, the reciprocity, and through participation in surface level activities, the idea in friendship development, by interacting, how based on their interests and ages, individuals can develop the deep structure reciprocity of friendship. So that's the goal. And they do this through the critical piece, is not only that they're interacting, but that in their interacting, there's affective sharing, which is defined as social engagement and simultaneous action. So it means that you're interacting together, doing something that you both like to do, that you're interacting while you do it, you're responsive to each other, and you appear to like each other and doing the thing you're doing together. Does that make sense? And so if you think about many students that we know with disabilities, there are some challenges in doing that, right? I think that might come to people's mind quickly. What I want to challenge, and I agree, and we can work on that, but by looking at the context of friendships, I also want you to think, how can peers without disabilities interact differently so that the affective sharing is happening while they're interacting? Are there things that we can do as adults to prepare students with and without disabilities before they start interacting to have more successful affective sharing in the interaction? Does that make sense? So I just wanted to ground us in some of the research, but it's basically that you're doing things together, that you're interacting and enjoying each other as you do it to get to friendship. So the idea here in how we can approach and promote friendships builds on all of that. And it's basically, as I said, a large framework, a broad framework that we can individualize for the students and children we know and their social context. So if we approach this work with a friendship mindset, we think about ways to increase opportunities. That's the surface level activities. We think about ways to improve the social interactions during those opportunities. That's the affective sharing. We might provide additional direct support strategies. We should, of course, do all of this by incorporating strengths and interests, because we all make friendships based on our interests, others who share our interests. And when students are seen as having strengths, peers notice that, especially if teachers indicate that. And we should focus on the social times of the day as much as possible, because school is structured by and for adults. Friendship mindset is basically, I imagine you all have the first two down pat: recognize the importance of friendship, believe the student or your child would make a wonderful friend. I was blown away when people didn't realize how cool my brother Todd was to hang out with, and that they didn't see what a privilege it was, like I was, to be able to hang out with him as a sibling. He had a wicked sense of humor. He would give me, a sly look if an attractive, girl walked by that he might be interested in, and he would get mad at me if I didn't, maybe support him to talk to her, or to, I things like that. It just blew me away that that was kind of a random example. Sorry about that. It blew me away that others didn't recognize that he could be such a fun and interesting and supportive friend. The other part of the friendship mindset is to just think constantly about social interaction opportunities and do what you can do. We're all busy. It's still a pandemic. Those of you who are teachers and work in the school, you're thinking about so many students and doing so much. So just think constantly about social interaction opportunities. Just start to try to think about it more and more and more. And then you'll naturally kind of develop this inherent sense of, oh, if I make this academic decision, there could be some negative social consequences. All right, if this student leaves class early to walk in a quiet hallway to get to the next class, that's helpful for some reasons, but they're not going to see their peers. Their peers aren't going to see them. How is that going to affect potential social opportunities? I've seen teachers in the moment, the way that they call on students, the speed with which they call on students, the wait time that they may or may not give, affects academic engagement, but there are social consequences of that too. I've seen students sitting, with autism, who require a little bit of wait time, sitting in the front of the class silent for weeks and months because the teacher is too quick, compared to a teacher, who says, okay, Schaefer, you're going to get question 3. I'm coming back to you, okay? And then calls on someone else for question 1, question 2. Schaefer has time to prepare or type. He used a communication device, his response, etc. And so Schaefer's classmates in that class see him as contributing and having capabilities and strengths, and he cracks jokes when he's responding, and his friends recognize that he seemed pretty funny and reached out to him because of it. In the other class, he was silent, just sat there, and nobody reached out to him. I throw this up in some of my presentations because I think a lot of this friendship work depends on students of various ages who have a lot going on. So we can't always rely on them, right? So we try to do what we can. We shoot for the moon of authentic relationships, of authentic friendship, trying to support students as much as possible, create opportunities as much as possible. And if we do that, we may not always get there, but we'll make improvements, right? That's a piece of this. High expectations as much as possible. Why, if anyone's thinking, how can they interact with my student or child? Why would they want to? I'm worried about this. I think a piece of this is also high expectations around the potential for friendship and risk taking. And that's up to each of you to decide where you are on that on your own. One parent that I worked with in New Hampshire, her thinking has stuck with me, and I often share what she said. She said about taking risks, because one of the risks she took with her daughter with Rett syndrome, who was about 4 years younger than me, was she hired someone in her town who just got his license to drive their accessible van that costs a lot of money, to bring her daughter and her daughter's friends and potential friends, to the park, to the mall, to the water slide place, so she didn't have to do that herself as the parent. And that 16-year-old who just got his license happened to be me. So it's a big risk that she took. But she said, what if I, after 50 risks or after 100 risks, I stopped because it was too hard. And that 101st time where I tried something or tried something new or tried something hard, it would have clicked. And she just felt motivated by that aspect. Another person I know who does some similar work, but for adults, talks about networking. She says, network, network, network. You never know who's going to know who might know someone else, who might know someone else, who also loves like the advanced statistics that are now, used in lots of sports and know what they all mean and might be interested in hanging out and starting a club about that. Or you might not, know until you start and network and network and network to see, what inclusive opportunities there are, or for adults who might be interested in hiring someone with a disability. So that's kind of the idea there too. Increasing the quantity of social opportunities. This is straightforward. It's what it sounds like. We want to increase these as much as we can, so that students have lots of opportunities, lots of regular opportunities in inclusive settings, for themselves to see who they like and who they like interacting with, as much as for their peers to see that they can interact and are a potential friend. And so this is going to be individualized, of course, because there are different rates or amounts of inclusive ed for all students. I would urge even students in substantially separate settings, to consider where you can be included in the other aspects, the other opportunities that LRE includes, extracurriculars, other school activities like recess, meals, dances, things like that. As much inclusion as possible, obviously. But friendships that occurred between students with and without disabilities, overwhelmingly, if not all of them, in the review that I did, included direct support from adults, from teachers and or parents and caregivers. And this is where the middle bullet there, being a facilitator, this is where the whole idea of addressing the context and facilitating opportunities rather than only thinking about this in terms of the student's social skills becomes critical. How can we create new opportunities? What do people who like trains and who are in the 5th grade do in Marblehead? What do Red Sox fans who are in 10th grade do in Marblehead? What opportunities can we create for individuals who really might be thriving during this time of COVID and prefer, maybe Zoom calls where there's less social anxiety, or they're in their home environment, or there's more structure. And how can we, build on that? The other piece of this, whether it's, virtual or live, is identifying missed opportunities that could be, better utilized or taken advantage of. And I think these are things like when classmates say hi or ask a question and students may not respond. What can we do as educators or family members in the community in the moment to maybe support a response or at least let kids know what's going on? Because especially as kids get older, there's only a couple of opportunities, right? Middle school students are worried about appearance and identity at times, and if there's something that makes them feel awkward or they don't know how to approach, they might not approach it again. Some of these quotes get at the inclusive aspect. There's more inclusion in the younger grades. Oftentimes, I imagine Marblehead may be similar. And so students with and without disabilities see each other much more. Students without disabilities see a full range of supports and behaviors, and teachers responding in certain ways to students with disabilities and maybe in different ways than they do to other students without disabilities. And they're taking all of that in and wondering about it and what to make of it in terms of social interactions. In this case, this student is looking at, they were talking about a student who yelled out swears, curse words, threw pencils, had some behaviors like that. And it was kind of just ignored. And so the student thought it was kind of funny and never had any support to process it, didn't know what to do, and said that he was kind of scared to interact with the student with a disability because he didn't know what that was all about. Another student said he wasn't necessarily scared, but he just didn't want to hang out with someone who was swearing all the time. So like there are unasked questions and conversations likely that could be had around these. I'm going to keep moving here because we're getting up on the hour. This gets at the idea of formalizing the approach to fostering relationships in the IEP. Social skills training is kind of, I think about it as being friendship adjacent. It's part of it. It's not the entire thing, and the context is what's important. But if you're using social skills training, just a quick plug, make sure it's systematic, explicit, and visual. As long as the program is those things, it's likely to be effective. But the important piece with social skills is social competence. And that's the idea of generalizing and enacting social skills in natural social settings with natural social partners. So if you're using any type of social skills programming, that needs to be key. Peer mediated instruction and intervention at the elementary school level, peer tutoring, middle and high school as kids get older, peer networks are evidence-based approaches to peer support, not friendship, but peer support instead of adult support, which increases interactions, which also is why I have this slide here. And if you're using peer mediated approaches, and you can see some links here, I can share this as a handout too, if you want. A couple of tips. Try to think about enacting it with reciprocal roles. Remember the reciprocity and mutuality. And friendships result from horizontal relationships that are reciprocal among students who are have the same social power or capital, rather than vertical relationships. And I think that's a key to how we approach it and what results in friendship. The other piece, because you might be thinking, my students or children have a lot of interactions, but maybe not friendships. And I think the next piece is to look at the quality of the social opportunities. Because in addition to increasing them, this is actually the more important piece that relates to the affective sharing in that earlier model. Because two students could interact frequently, but their social interactions could be one-sided, surface level, focused on help or support only, being polite, interacting superficially. The goal here is that high quality social opportunities go beyond mere acceptance and greetings like my brother had. Working together in class, being in best buddies or being in unified sports are good starts, but it should go beyond that. It should build from there. And looking at how students are interacting during their opportunities is a big piece of this. There are kind of interactions that start out and then kind of fizzle away. A student might be focusing on their interest area, might be a little rigid in some ways, and it's relying on the peer to be flexible or figure out how to solve it. And it might get to a point where students are not enjoying the interaction. And I've seen that many times, and I imagine you have as well. And as I said, it only takes a couple of those times for students to be kind of turned off in a sense, and recognize that, well, this wasn't an enjoyable interaction. I'm going to try to interact with others. And whatever we can do as teachers to provide supports in the moment to students with and without disabilities, or prepare them ahead of time, teach them about things like wait time, teach, structure interactions, and then, kind of release the scaffolds like we do with academic supports. All of these ideas are strategies that can improve how students are interacting. And the idea, I want to return to how students without disabilities think about this, because I've recently done some focus groups with them, and I've been really curious how they're perceiving friendships with students with disabilities and friendships in general. And so this 11th grader makes a distinction between an acquaintance and a close friend, an actual authentic friend. And for this 11th grader, and I think it holds true for a lot of older students, if you don't know someone as well, if you're not as close with them, it might be more formal. But when you are closer with someone, you'll just tease them and joke around with them, and they'll kind of just understand. And compare that with how they talked about how they or their peers interacted or thought about interacting with students with disabilities. And these are big high school students, big, tough, mature high school students who are saying things that, like, they're not sure how to approach them. They're kind of scared. The thought of it's tough to wrap your head around it. I'm afraid to say the wrong thing and maybe offend them. And I think a lot of the dynamic that we see that prevents inclusive relationships, authentic friendships gets at this. If there are opportunities to interact, do students without disabilities feel comfortable? Do they know what to do? Can they see the person first, not the disability? Do they know, are they interacting based on shared interests or just because they're in this club together? All of these questions are critical. I'm going to skip. Actually, let's look at a scenario. Can we open up, maybe talk through this scenario together and then maybe open it up for the Q&A?
Absolutely. I think that people should be able to unmute themselves and write in the chat or just, just speak right out. So yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think, I'm curious. I've spent a lot of time talking about these foundational pieces and kind of attitudinal pieces in this large framework, but it really is to be individualized. But it really, in many ways, once you think about friendship in this way and think about increasing opportunities or improving the quality of opportunities, when you think about specific children in specific situations like this scenario, the strategies are pretty straightforward. And hopefully that's helpful and exciting and optimistic to you, because it is to me. So looking at this, Sarah had a little bit of trouble, at recess. Sarah, a third grader with Down syndrome, wanted to jump rope with her classmates at recess. She asked to be next, but they ignored her. Several classmates took turns ahead of her. Then Sarah walked in the way and grabbed the rope. She said it was her turn and wanted to play. Her classmates yelled for the recess monitor and it dissolved. So I'm curious, what would you do to increase Sarah's social opportunities just based on the information in this scenario? What would you do to improve the quality of her social opportunities? What jumps out at you? And people can raise their hand or put things in the chat. Any thoughts? I'm working on my waiting time.
So Zach, I think you mentioned earlier this idea that peers need time together. I mean, they need to understand each other, right? So
Yeah.
are the peers really understanding what Sarah's going through, right?
Right.
And the story that I have around that's always emotional for me, but watching this boy understand my son on the soccer field, knowing that when someone took the ball and kicked it away, he was in the role of goalie. The rule is I kick the ball. And this boy went and ran, and no one knows what's going on, ran and grabbed the ball and brought it back for my son to kick.
Huh.
Right?
Oh my
They
gosh.
know when peers get a chance
Yes.
to learn about each other, they connect in such a deep level. And so it just feels like
Completely.
Sarah, they're not understanding what it is that's triggering her, what's going on for her.
Right. And oftentimes we as teachers and parents may see the behavior, the problem that kind of might prevent future opportunities or future connections. Yeah, that's great. Does someone else want to share something? I thought I heard someone unmute.
We have a couple in the chat. So I'll just kind of summarize a little bit. Definitely, to Scott's point, the sense of empathy and creating an opportunity for developing a shared understanding of how to best engage and play during, a class community meeting or time frame. So a lot of, kind of piggybacking a little bit on what Scott had said.
Yeah, I love that. I think that you know, to the degree, again, this is tough because it's a little, 3-sentence blurb. We don't know Sarah. There's probably a role in here for Sarah to work on some skills as well, right? She wanted to jump rope. She asked to be next. Students ignored her. So maybe an adult could structure jump rope in terms of how the line operates as a strategy. But I think the big piece, and I'm glad that that people are focusing on that. The big piece is connecting, understanding each other, and that works both ways. Sarah can and should understand. In this case, students ignored her, and so she eventually took control of the situation. But that she could wait a little bit. Any other thoughts on that one? Empathy from early age.
I always play out these scenarios because they are snippets, right? And it's
Right.
kind of, how did that recess monitor react? What was the next step? Because could that have been used, as an opportunity for all kids that were involved in terms of, if that happens next time, what's the appropriate response, and how can we continue to develop those relationships, in those positive ways. And so I think on both sides of it, to the experiences that the teachers have provided, you touched on that a little bit, in the classroom and partnering with parents outside the classroom. So that modeling is continuous, throughout. So those scenarios always get me, right? Because they're quick, but I always have more questions for what that looks like.
But I have a question, Zach, on that one, because they're little.
Sure.
And so would it be possible in this instance, when they called to the recess monitor, or maybe even the next day, if, as I think you were saying it, Zach, if the monitor just rotated who would play, and included Sarah in that scenario, so that she wouldn't have to wrench it away and she could participate, maybe the kids could get to know her that way, because third grade, they're very young. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but that's what I'm asking you.
Oh, I certainly, yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that structuring what happens, especially at recess, which is really hectic, really sensory overwhelming for anyone, younger children, students with disabilities, of course. So it's hard to keep up with things, and it moves so quickly. And I think that slowing some things down or adding some kind of structure in the ways that you said, and is I think part of the facilitation efforts that have led to students getting to know each other and understanding each other. And then they kind of take it from there, as like it's really that. So I remember a student with autism who loved Lightning McQueen. That was in one of my studies. And at recess, and he loved math. And at recess, he would run laps around the playground as if he were Lightning McQueen, making car sounds and timing himself with a stopwatch and trying to beat his time. And so his love of numbers, his physical activity, his love of Lightning McQueen, there's so much to go on there in terms of connecting students. And this was a fantastic inclusive second grade or first grade class, I think. And I didn't notice anyone really building on those things. And then I noticed a couple of things at recess, like these missed opportunities that could have been taken advantage of. A girl in his class who knew him from the neighborhood and was in his class the prior year. So those are all things that
It's like a-
families
Yeah.
and teachers should know and try to build off as well. As he was running around, she held out her hand and I assume was going to give him a high five as he came running by. And I was just, I was there as a researcher, so I didn't, I wish I had, well, so he comes, so she holds up her hand, he comes running by and just, chugging away, and I'm hoping for the connection, and he just keeps his head down and runs straight by her.
Life happens.
Like, I know, and she held her hand out one more time. He did it again. I kind of wish I had, involved myself somehow, but as a researcher, I was standing back. And then she turned to go talk to her friends. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for some of what we've been talking about tonight. That some of these opportunities, initial opportunities, might be quick, might be fleeting, are really important to, connect kids, even if that happened and you notice it or hear about it. Yeah, how can you talk to her and him, maybe the entire class, about how to connect, how to support each other, how to be inclusive as a class or as a second grader or whatever. All of these types of discussions, I think, can build on whatever SEL curricula are involved or things like that. And I hope that, disability and friendships across disability could be part of, whatever SEL efforts are happening as well, to tie into something else.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I think, we have plenty of time for questions. I haven't been paying attention to the chat.
Eric, have you been paying attention to the chat?
I have. There have been some fantastic comments, just based on Dr. Rossetti, your presentation so far. Lots of grateful participants tonight, myself included in that, but no specific questions that I saw, throughout. So I think that maybe they were holding up to the end. So whoever's on, feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute yourself and jump right in. Yep.
Thank you.
While we're waiting, could I just ask you to maybe expand on a couple of things?
Sure.
One of the things that was in your list was, that adults basically should step back and be out of the way. And it reminded me, I had a child once, a student who had cerebral palsy, and he traveled with an aide, but he was a known person in the school district ever since he was a little kid. So he did have a lot of friends, but he kept going like this, pushing the aide away. And because he got in the way of his social life.
Yep.
So this was a teenager by the time I met him. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because that's obviously what the mom was doing when she hired you to drive her daughter around.
Right.
Because I think that's really important, that adults should kind of stay out of the way when they can, lay the table and then leave,
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think there are a couple of ways to think about it. One is peer support whenever possible. And you just mentioned that, we talked about some examples. And I think in terms of adult support, because I did mention that direct support by adults was present in most, if not all, of the friendships and in the research and that I've known. So I think it's being subtle about what you do, kind of monitoring from afar, jumping in when you need to, and then fading back out. And I remember there's a third grade teacher I was working with last year or second grade teacher who had a student she was trying to, promote relationships with. And he happened to break his middle finger. He slammed his hand in the door. And so for a week or two while he had a cast, he was doing indoor recess. And this is not, I don't recommend anyone breaking anyone's finger as a friendship strategy. But he was indoor recess. She invited a peer that he liked and that appeared to like him to be at indoor recess with him. This student loved making marble runs, and like he'll be an engineer or an architect. Like he was fabulous at it. and she thought I'm going to set them up. They're going to make marble runs. They'll be at recess together. This is fabulous. Like it's too hectic outdoors. This is better for him anyways. And so she just gave them the material, stepped back, and let them go. And they were playing separately, parallel. They were each doing their own thing. And then I actually was there. And then we noticed that the student without a disability kept looking over once they started building stuff to see what his classmate was doing, because it was so much better than his. And he kept looking, and he was leaning in, and he almost said something once but didn't, and then almost said something again but didn't. And the student was so focused on his own marble run that he didn't notice any of that. And so finally this teacher, looked at me and she said, you told me to fade back. Can I go in and just tell them something? And I was like, yes. And she went in, and she just knelt down at his level and said quietly to him, why don't you show your friend, what you're doing, and tell him about your marble run? And then with that quick prompt, he just started talking, and they had a conversation, and they were kind of building his marble run together the rest of the time.
Really
So
awesome.
that kind of in the moment support is usually, if someone did that, if I did that, when this boy was running around being Lightning McQueen, like they could have high-fived, and we could have talked, they could have had that interaction. That's what I think about there. So I think that paraprofessionals in particular, I think can and should be taught to monitor from afar. Sometimes, think they need to be there and protect the child or protect the class from the child type thing. And it's the Velcro kind of idea. And all the research and personal experiences, if the paraprofessional or other adult leaves, kids will fill the space. If you might have to prep ahead of time a little bit, but kids will fill the space that adults leave behind.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, paras can do a lot of the in the moment stuff too. And especially if you have a young para, young teachers who, well, not necessarily young, but I don't know why I said that. Oh, I was thinking when I was young, I was one of the only males in an elementary school. And I think I had some, social capital as a young male in this elementary school, and used to try to pull kids in and get kids interacting. Like there are people who are just for some identity aspect, or they're just outgoing and kind of social magnets themselves that are better at this work than others. So I think it's important to kind of think through as a team, who's good at this, who's around, who can do it. Am I good at it? If not, I can help plan, but like, maybe someone else is doing the direct work.
I think also, Zach, that sometimes, and we've experienced that, we've had a para or two who are just fun, and it's just,
yes,
they transcend the whole process. That's what I meant by sometimes the paras, they're the glue. They bring it all, and
yes,
kids want to be part of it. So they're just, the
Right.
resources they can bring are fantastic.
Yeah.
we should double their salary, keep them forever.
Oh my God, don't get me started.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing, Zach, what you're really pointing out is that the ability to watch and to be able to see the dynamics that are happening, right? And
Yeah.
really cue into that so that you can see those moments where, oh, if I just help right here, then I can step back again, and this will evolve into something, more meaningful and more mutual and more exciting for both of the kids involved, right? Really being able to just see those dynamics playing out. And that, that's just so powerful when the adults in the room are able to do that.
And I just wanted to add, when the adults can trust our children, like you said, to take it on and do it.
Yeah, it is. I think of it as an art form because it's individualized and it requires close attention to those dynamics and figuring out just the right amount of support, just the right type of support.
But Zach, at some point, the peers, they've got it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to trust them. You know,
Oh, they figure it out, whether it's, yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I think you know, teacher concerns, some valid, many kids can kind of figure it out or roll with it a little bit. Everyone was always concerned, all of my brother's teachers who were great for the most part and loved him and you know, said that we're worried that he was too loud, made sounds, drooled. That's, you know, that related to his disability and presentation. Those were some things. And it was never an issue. It was never an issue. Students who need frequent breaks or students, like the kids figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
And they can roll with it if we, you know, kind of explain something in developmentally, you know, appropriate ways. I always used to say, you can talk to my brother, talk to him like anyone else. He can hear you. He can't talk back, but he can hear you. Like things like that. You know, she needs to do this when she's learning, or he needs to walk around for, you know, because blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like we should do much more of that type of thing. And then that allows kids to, you know, have even more understanding and tools to figure it out even more.
And they will. And it's almost like when you give them these opportunities and the friendships start to develop, they kind of transcend the disability. I mean, and what you're left with is the relationship.
Yeah.
And if I can just add one thing, because I did read your toolkit. It's 40 pages, folks. It is the most phenomenal thing because a lot of it is what you're touching on tonight.
Yeah.
Except that you go into such detail because it's done by grade levels almost, you know, elementary, middle, high school, and the differences in those three areas and how you can foster these relationships. Obviously, I was fascinated, but it's really terrific. And there were a lot of comments in the chat tonight that really said that they appreciated how personal you were in sharing your brother's story. So folks, there are a lot of little stories in this one little toolkit. I was thinking of the three girls, the high school girls, Rose, Ryan, Allie, and Sam. And I mean, so it's all there in plain English with good strategies, just great. I mean, that's all.
Zach, I wanted to also thank you for sharing so much about your brother. I know it's been, he's been such an important part of your life.
Yeah.
But Melissa had a really good point, and I'm wondering if she would be willing to come off mute and ask her question directly.
Sure. Did that work? Oh, it's dark in here. Yeah, I was just turn this on. I just had a quick question about how we can build the friendship aspect into our kids' IEPs, and like because I feel like some the IEPs are often so specific, you know, in our goals. How do we phrase that? Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, I can share. The ARC has a nice resource about this as well, which I can share. You know, get to you all. I think first of all, I think that most students, certainly all students with certain labels, you know, like autism or in particular, should have social goals. So one way is social goals, and because you know, social skills aren't, you know, are friendship adjacent, not friendship. I think that including an emphasis on social competence, not just social skills in terms of either the goal or some of the you know, benchmarks, or is one way to do it. another way, I think in the, you know, in the context of certain goals or certain supports, I think there are different places to write in things like, you know, group work, partner work, things like that. That so thinking about interactions, you know, the conditions for the goals. For some goals include, you know, working with peers, and I think, you know, depending on the student, I mean, I've had students who expanded their kind of narrower focus on social skills to like social competence by including, you know, details like asking a peer, using, you know, certain prompts to eat lunch together, and using sentence starters at lunch will initiate or will respond. So, you know, like I think basically expanding including social skills, expanding social skills to in some of these ways are probably the starting points. I might be forgetting something. It's getting a little late at night, but
So Zach, one of the challenges I have in all of this is I have to follow you in our next session, I think. And what I want,
I'm
so I
sure
wanna
you'll be
ask-
fine, Scott.
No. You were fantastic. What I want to ask is, what about project-based learning? Doesn't that
Oh.
provide oh, thank you, because that's what I was going to go with. And
Oh my
that
god,
look
yeah,
right
that's
there
one
helps me.
thing I was forgetting. Yeah, I mean, there are something like that in IEPs or in the school in the grade level. It just like exponentially increases opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, social interaction opportunities and so much potential to implement all of these supports in something in that
Okay.
context.
Good, because I'll be combining that with the SEL skills. So the
Yeah.
social emotional learning skills within project-based learning helps everyone. And
And
really
you can
connect.
find, you don't have to like, you know, be off to the side or have some artificial adaptations that peers can kind of see through or that students might feel bad about. In project-based, you can differentiate and figure out meaningful roles for everybody. And
Exactly.
you know, and again, how peers think about a student with a disability, you know, is critical. And if they, you know, if someone's consistently fulfilling, you know, roles that aren't that meaningful or connected, that students recognize these things. And hopefully, I mean, it would be great. I've known of a few classes where students acted as advocates and said like, why is she off to the side with the para, or why is he doing that baby work? Like I've last year in class he did this and this, and like, let's go.
Right.
So I think empowering students too to be advocates is a good strategy over the years as well.
And it gives a chance to, it gives kids a chance, all kids, not just kids with disabilities, a chance to work based on their interests and based on their strengths as well, if you're doing projects. So it's a win, I think. This has been so fabulous.
So fun.
It's great. Eric, do you want to add anything to this in terms of IEP, the IEP question or anything else?
I would love to. I'm just reading. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
I don't think so. Sure. Yeah. No, Dr. Rossetti, this was fantastic. I could go on and I won't. People who know me know that I could go on, but I won't. Just in terms of takeaways, you know, I've written 2-3 pages of notes here, you know, just in terms of your takeaways and key aspects. I think, Melissa, to your question, you know, and your point and what Zach kind of just touched on, I think just to provide a little bit of context within Marblehead and certainly our department is, you know, we're hoping to really ask those next questions of, you know, how is that truly an IEP thing, if you will, right? Is that really a specialized instructional need, or is that something that through our culture in Marblehead, that becomes the universal approach, right, for all kids? I think that's what Dr. Rossetti touched on a lot, right? And certainly for me, the biggest thing that, and I'll only say one, is that you know, we all seek connection, and I appreciate the fact that you know, you provided a lot of examples, certainly about students, your personal, you know, experiences, and I really appreciate that. But I kept coming back to connecting that to us as adults, and I think that's the same thing. We all look for connection. You know, that's part of our identity. We want to be included, and so how can we really model that and structure that within our educational community? And that's the goal. And so certainly, you know, it's not 100% anywhere where all kids can be fully included at all times, but if we can really embrace that mindset, I mean, that's such a big takeaway, and look at all of the benefits to that. And so again, I'll stop there because I could digress for a while, but this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Thank you. And it's so exciting to hear you talk about the you know, broader culture and systems beyond just the IEP. I mean, I think the IEP can be a useful strategy. A lot of times, you know, people might use it as a way to try to enforce some strategies or opportunities because they aren't happening systems wide or in the culture, that things haven't changed. And so to hear that is really, really exciting.
Well, I don't want to cut this short, but we only have you for a couple more minutes. I just want to, in case if anybody else wants to say anything, please feel free, Kim, Scott, but I just want to thank you. This has just been phenomenally exciting and productive and useful and enjoyable, totally enjoyable. And I hope you'll come back. So,
thank you. There's so much to talk about. I'm glad. I hope this was helpful, because I think that you know, one thing I think it came across in certain ways. I didn't say it explicitly. Many of these strategies and that we often think about for students with disabilities, like they need social skills. Well, like all kids need social skills,
right.
And peers need to learn how to, like you know, the friendship work piece I mentioned. That's what they can learn. And so anything, whenever, you know, I catch myself sometimes. You know, but whenever we start thinking like, oh, the student with the disability should do this or needs to do this, you know, one way I think to have a friendship mindset is to remember that it takes two. So what do the peers need to do, and how can we address that? Do they need, you know, social skills to be more patient, or is it a school culture thing? Or we, you know, like the next week's topics, when Scott's going, I think we'll address some of that as well for all students through the SEL and project based. Yeah, I'm glad we had this opportunity to talk. I don't really have a big bang to end on other than saying thank you.
No,
I forgot my big bang, or I lost it at some point. Now I'm just tired.
I think Kimberly has it. She's going to bring us home.
Yeah.
Really? I didn't plan that part. I planned the intro. Thanks for queuing me up like that, Zach. I just wanted to, you know, on behalf of the CPAC, and well, I can't really speak on behalf of
yes, you can.
But as a parent in the school district, and a member of the CPAC, I thank you so much for being here tonight. I just like Eric, I have all these notes, and I've read your material before, and yet I was still taking notes and like quotes of things that you said, and just really appreciate you sharing your research and your insights, and also your personal experiences yourself and with your brother. And you know, I know that we have a lot here that we can take forward with us, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Yes.
And I'll get you one of you four who helped coordinate the handout, if you want to try to get it to folks.
We would love that. Thank you so much. This has been
All right.
really a pleasure. can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And although it's been plugged now twice, next month, for anybody in the audience listening, Dr. Scott Solberg is going to talk to us. I think it's April 6th, right, Scott?
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah,
Sometime in
I'm
April.
pretty sure it is.
If you liked mine, wait for Scott.
Oh, wait.
Here's the big bag.
No. Zachary, this was fantastic.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Really, thank you.
Thank
Really-
you all.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything. And
All right.
we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Jack, thanks so much
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
for being here.
All right.
All right, thank you, Zach.